After Elvis Presley died, his personal doctor's private files were locked away for years. But when they were finally opened, what investigators saw inside raised serious questions no one expected. Strange records, missing details, and confusing notes changed everything people thought they knew. What really happened behind those closed doors that shocked the medical world so deeply? Stay with us. The silence after the legend. The world had barely finished mourning when strange events began to unfold behind closed doors. After the death of Elvis Presley, grief filled every corner of the public space. But inside private offices, a different kind of silence took over. Medical records that had once been handled quietly during his life were now locked away and treated with unusual care. These were not ordinary papers. They carried details of prescriptions, visits, and long medical routines that had followed him in his final years. As time passed, people close to the situation noticed that some files were being moved, sealed, and stored with strict control. What seemed like simple record-keeping slowly began to feel like something more serious, as if every page held weight far beyond ink and paper. In the middle of this quiet tension stood the personal doctor who had once been closest to Elvis during his final years. He was known as Dr. George Nicopolis, often called Dr. Nick by those around him. After the death, he became unusually distant, avoiding attention and keeping to himself more than before. People who once saw him regularly now described him as guarded, as if every question carried risk. He did not share much about the past treatments, and his silence only made curiosity grow stronger. The public only saw headlines and memories, but inside the medical world, people began to wonder what really happened in those final months of care. The doctor's office, once active and busy, now felt heavier, filled with unanswered questions and closed conversations that never reached clarity. As investigations slowly began around Elvis's medical history, rumors started to spread among those who had once been close to the situation. Some spoke quietly about missing notes that could no longer be found in the usual records. Others mentioned prescriptions that seemed altered or written in a way that raised questions later. Locked drawers inside the medical office became a point of curiosity, especially those that were never opened while Elvis was still alive. Nothing was openly confirmed, but the pattern of uncertainty grew stronger with each passing day. People who worked near the files began to feel that parts of the story were no longer complete, as if certain details had been removed or hidden without a clear explanation. This growing doubt created a heavy shadow over everything that was left behind. Years after the death, a legal need for review finally brought the sealed medical files into focus. As part of estate management and official verification, certain records were requested for closer inspection. What had once been private documentation was now part of a formal process that required transparency. Boxes that had remained untouched for years were carefully gathered and prepared for review. The atmosphere during this stage was tense, as if everyone understood that the contents might raise questions that had never been answered before. Each file carried the weight of history, and the decision to open them was not taken lightly. The process was slow and controlled, with every step reminding those involved that they were dealing with the final medical traces of a public figure whose life had already been studied the world. When the investigation team began sorting through the first set of files, the early steps seemed routine, but small details quickly raised concern. Dates did not always align with expected timelines, and some entries overlapped in ways that did not make sense at first glance. The deeper they went, the more they felt the records were not simple medical notes, but layered documents that required careful interpretation. Every folder opened revealed another question instead of an answer. The quiet room where the review was taking place grew heavier with each discovery, as if the past resisted being understood. Still, they continued forward, knowing stopping now would leave the story unfinished. When the first box was finally unsealed, the investigator paused in silence. Inside were records that should have matched known timelines, but something felt wrong immediately. The dates written across several pages did not align with the official understanding of Elvis's final months. This single detail changed everything, turning careful review into a deeper and unsettling mystery. The first impossible record. One file alone should have been routine, something simple to confirm and file away, but it was not. From the moment it was opened, it carried a strange weight that made the room feel tighter. It suggested something no one expected, that the medical story of Elvis Presley might not have been as simple as history had recorded. What should have been ordinary paperwork now felt like the beginning of a deeper and more confusing puzzle, one that refused to settle into a clear answer. Investigators carefully began sorting through the first batch of materials. There were handwritten notes, prescription slips, and appointment logs arranged in no clear order. Each page looked familiar on its own, but together they started to form something unsettling. The records were supposed to create a smooth timeline of medical care, yet the more they studied them, the more the timeline seemed to break apart in small but noticeable ways. Nothing was loud or obvious, but the small gaps began to matter more than the details that were present. The earliest inconsistencies appeared slowly, almost quietly. Some prescriptions seemed to appear twice within days of each other, written in ways that looked similar but did not fully match when compared side by side. At first, it was easy to assume simple administrative error, but the pattern continued. Certain consultation summaries that should have explained visits were missing entirely, leaving only dates and short notes that did not provide full context. In other places, medications appeared to change suddenly, without any written explanation, as if decisions had been made but never fully recorded in the proper way. These gaps created a growing sense that something important was not fully captured in the official documents. As the investigators continued, a pattern slowly began to emerge. It seemed that Elvis's condition may have been tracked far more closely than what had been publicly understood at the time. The frequency of notes suggested constant attention, with changes being made and recorded in short intervals. However, the records did not always explain why those changes were happening. It created a strange contrast between intense medical attention and missing reasoning behind it. This gap raised quiet concern among the team reviewing the files, because it suggested a level of complexity that was not visible on the surface. As they moved deeper into the collection, they began to notice something else. The handwriting of the doctor appeared to change over time. At first, it was steady, controlled, and clear, suggesting careful documentation and confidence in what was being written. But as the pages continued, the tone of the writing shifted. It became more rushed, uneven, and harder to follow. Some notes looked hurried, as if written under pressure or during moments of stress. This change in handwriting added another layer of uncertainty, making the timeline feel even more unstable. It gave the impression that whatever was happening behind the scenes may have been growing more difficult as time moved forward. While sorting through another group of papers, one of the investigators discovered a sealed envelope placed carefully between two thick folders. It looked older than the rest, with edges slightly worn, as if it had been handled less frequently than the other documents. On the front of the envelope was a short instruction written in firm handwriting. It simply said, "Do not open unless necessary." The message immediately drew attention, because nothing else in the files carried such direct warning. The room grew quiet as everyone paused, aware that whatever was inside had been intentionally set aside for a specific reason. The envelope was eventually opened with care, and inside was a single page. At first glance, it seemed like a short note, but as they began to read, something felt wrong. The writing was uneven, and parts of the message appeared rushed, almost like it had been written in a moment of urgency or distress. The sentence was not complete in a normal sense. It seemed to carry meaning, but only part of it could be clearly understood. The rest was faded or cut off, leaving only fragments that did not fully connect. The ink appeared broken in places, as if time or damage had taken away the rest of the message. What remained readable was enough to change the feeling in the room. It suggested panic, a moment where something important was being realized too late or under pressure. But before the meaning could be fully understood, the sentence ended abruptly, leaving everything incomplete. The investigators looked at each other in silence, knowing that this single unfinished message might be pointing towards something far bigger than anything they had seen so far. The hidden treatments. What they believed was routine care now began to look like something far more complex and far more secretive. The files that once seemed like normal medical records were slowly revealing a deeper layer that no one expected to find. Each page added more uncertainty, as if the true structure of the treatment history had been hidden under years of careful silence. What looked simple at first was now turning into a tangled record of decisions, actions, and changes that did not fully match the public understanding of events. As the investigators continued reading, they discovered signs of overlapping treatments that were never publicly documented. Different entries suggested that care was not coming from a single clear direction. Instead, there were multiple layers of involvement recorded in different styles and formats. Some notes hinted that other doctors may have been involved indirectly, even if their names were not officially listed in the main records. These hidden connections created confusion because they suggested that the medical situation was not handled in a straightforward way. The more they looked, the more it felt like different hands had shaped the treatment plan at different times without a single consistent structure guiding it. As they moved deeper into the documents, subtle signs of experimental or unconventional approaches began to appear in the notes. These were not clearly labeled, but they were suggested through unusual combinations of treatment methods and repeated adjustments that did not follow a simple pattern. Some entries showed sudden changes in approach, as if something was being tried and then quickly adjusted again. There was no clear explanation attached to many of these shifts, leaving the investigators to wonder why certain decisions were made in such rapid succession. It created the impression that the medical care may have been responding to a condition that was difficult to control or fully understand at the time. Conflicting prescriptions added to the growing tension. In some places, treatments appeared to overlap in ways that did not align properly. In others, medications were changed in short periods without clear reasoning recorded in between. This pattern suggested urgency, as if someone was trying to stabilize a rapidly changing condition without enough time to fully document each step. The records did not show calm decision-making, but instead reflected pressure and constant adjustment. Each contradiction added weight to the idea that the situation was more unstable than anyone had previously believed. While reviewing a large section of files, the investigators discovered a second layer hidden behind what appeared to be a false folder divider. At first, it looked like an ordinary separation within the archive, but when carefully examined, it revealed additional documents placed behind it. These hidden pages were not immediately visible and seemed deliberately separated from the main collection. Their placement suggested that they were meant to be kept apart from the rest of the records. This discovery changed the direction of the investigation again, because it meant that the full story had not been presented in one complete set. Inside this hidden layer, the tone of the documents began to shift in a noticeable way. For the first time, emotional notes from the doctor appeared, no longer written in a purely clinical style. The language was still simple and direct, but it carried signs of personal strain and distress. The handwriting appeared less controlled in some sections, and the structure of the notes felt heavier, as if the writer was struggling to maintain clarity while recording events. These were not just medical observations anymore. They reflected a human reaction to pressure, uncertainty, and responsibility. The emotional weight in the writing made the situation feel more real and more fragile at the same time. As the investigators continued through these pages, they realized that the doctor's tone was changing alongside the progression of events. What had once been professional documentation was now mixed with signs of internal conflict. Some lines seemed careful, while others appeared rushed or uneven, as if written in moments of emotional strain. This shift suggested that the situation being recorded was not only medically complex, but also personally difficult for the person documenting it. The records were no longer just about treatment, they were becoming a reflection of stress building over time. At the very end of this hidden section, one entry stood out more than the others. It mentioned something described as a final decision, but there was no explanation attached to it. The sentence stopped there, leaving no context or detail about what that decision involved or why it was made. The page following it was completely missing, as if it had been removed or never included in the archive at all. This sudden gap created a strong sense of interruption, as if an important part of the story had been cut away right at the moment it mattered most. The investigators sat in silence as they realized that this missing page might hold the key to everything they had been reading so far, but it was no longer there to guide them forward. The night notes that should not exist. Then they find something no one expected at all. Hidden inside the deeper section of the archive were handwritten notes from the night everything began to fall apart. These were not part of the earlier medical summaries or routine records. They felt different the moment they were seen, as if they carried the weight of a single long night where everything changed too quickly to fully control. The paper looked slightly worn, and the ink varied in darkness, suggesting they were written in bursts rather than in calm moments. As the investigators carefully read through the pages, they noticed a series of time-stamped entries. Each one marked short intervals, showing rapid changes in Elvis Presley's condition during that night. The notes moved forward step by step, but the progression was uneven and unsettling. Some entries were close together, almost as if the writer was updating the situation repeatedly within short periods of time. This created a sense of urgency, like events were unfolding faster than anyone could properly manage. The structure of the writing showed no steady rhythm, only constant updates reflecting shifting conditions. With each entry, the tone of the doctor began to change in a way that was impossible to ignore. At first, the writing still carried a sense of control, as if the situation was being managed with confidence. But as the pages continued, that control slowly disappeared. The language became less steady, the structure less organized, and the clarity began to fade. What replaced it was something closer to fear. The words no longer sounded like simple medical observation. They felt heavier, as if the writer was reacting to something unexpected and increasingly difficult to handle. The shift was gradual but unmistakable. Some of the entries suggested that Elvis himself may have been more aware of his condition than was publicly admitted at the time. There were references that implied awareness of physical decline, expressed through indirect observations recorded by the doctor. These notes did not present certainty, but they hinted that Elvis might have understood that something serious was happening to his body. This created a deeper emotional layer to the records, because it suggested that the patient and the doctor were both facing the situation in real time, without full clarity on what would follow next. As the investigators continued reading, they found conflicting notes about treatments that were being used during that night. Some entries suggested certain actions were helping stabilize the condition, while others written shortly after implied little or no improvement. In some cases, the effectiveness of the same treatment seemed to change depending on the time it was recorded. This contradiction created confusion in the timeline, as if different interpretations were being written while events were still unfolding. The lack of consistency made it difficult to understand whether the situation was improving or getting worse, adding to the overall sense of uncertainty in the records. One page stood out from the rest because it appeared to have been rewritten multiple times. The handwriting showed visible layers of correction, with lines crossed out and rewritten in different ways. It looked as if the author had struggled to decide what should remain and what should be changed. Some sentences were partially erased, while others were rewritten in a slightly different form, suggesting hesitation or second thoughts. This page gave the impression of someone trying to balance truth with caution, unsure of how much should be recorded or how it would be interpreted later. The repeated revisions made it one of the most unstable pieces in the entire file. As more of the night notes were reviewed, the investigators slowly came to a difficult realization. These files were no longer just medical records in the traditional sense. They were not clean summaries meant for future reference or official review. Instead, they felt like a live record of panic, written in real time as events unfolded without clear control. Every page reflected pressure, uncertainty, and emotional strain that built up as the night continued. The structure of the documentation no longer followed standard medical order. It followed emotion, urgency, and reaction. The final part of the night notes became even more unsettling as the pages moved toward their end. The writing grew more fragmented, with shorter entries and less detailed explanations. The sense of stability that existed at the beginning of the records was completely gone by this point. What remained was a series of urgent observations that no longer connected smoothly. The investigators could feel the intensity rising even through the simple language used in the notes. At the very bottom of a torn page, a final line appeared. It was written in uneven handwriting, as if recorded in a moment of extreme pressure. The sentence was short, but carried heavy meaning. It suggested that if what was written ever became public, everything would change completely. The page ended there, with no continuation and no explanation. The torn edge made it clear that something followed, but it was no longer present in the file. The investigators sat in silence, understanding that they were no longer just reading history. They were looking at a moment that someone once feared the world might never see. Pressure, silence, and the locked truth. At this point, the investigation stops feeling like a simple medical review and starts feeling like something much heavier. It no longer looks like just reading old files or checking past treatment records. Instead, it begins to feel like a cover-up slowly unfolding in real time, with each new discovery raising more questions than answers. The atmosphere around the investigation changes completely, becoming tense, controlled, and carefully watched, as if every movement inside the room carries hidden meaning. Soon after the deeper files are opened, external pressure begins to appear. Lawyers connected to the estate, representatives handling official matters, and unnamed authorities start requesting access to the documents. Their presence is not loud or dramatic, but it is constant and firm. They ask for updates, clarification, and careful handling of every page being reviewed. The investigators notice that the attention from outside is growing stronger with each step they take deeper into the records. It creates an unspoken sense that the investigation is no longer only about medical history, but also about control over what should or should not be revealed. As the review continues, something more unsettling happens. Some documents that were previously seen and recorded are suddenly marked as missing during the process. Pages that were once part of the collection cannot be located in their expected place. At first, it is thought to be a simple misplacement or filing error, but the pattern begins to repeat. More sections appear incomplete, and entire pages that were clearly referenced earlier are no longer available in the archive. This creates confusion and suspicion among the investigators because the disappearance does not seem random. It feels selective, as if certain parts of the story are being removed at specific moments. The situation grows more serious as the investigators begin to suspect intentional removal or suppression of information. The timing of the missing documents does not appear accidental. Each gap seems to appear right when the content becomes more sensitive or harder to explain. This leads to growing concern that someone may have accessed the archive and changed its structure after the initial review began. The idea that the records could be altered adds a new layer of uncertainty because it means the investigation may not be looking at a complete version of the truth. During this tense stage, the doctor's private correspondence is also reviewed more closely. These writings are different from the earlier medical notes. They are more personal, less structured, and filled with emotional strain. The tone suggests internal pressure building over time. There are signs of concern about responsibility, fear of interpretation, and uncertainty about how events might be judged later. The writing does not give clear answers, but it shows that the person recording the events was carrying emotional weight that went beyond professional duty. It becomes clear that the situation was affecting not only medical decisions, but also the mental state of the person documenting them. At the same time, conflicting accounts begin to appear between official reports and private notes. The official documents present structured information that follows expected patterns, while the private records sometimes suggest different details or unclear explanations. These differences are not easy to ignore. They do not completely contradict each other in an obvious way, but they do not fully align either. This creates a space of uncertainty where the truth feels split between what was officially recorded and what was privately written. The investigators struggle to understand which version reflects the real sequence of events. As the gaps grow larger and the contradictions increase, a deeper question slowly begins to form. The investigators start to wonder if the truth was ever meant to be fully known at all. The structure of the files, the missing pages, and the emotional tone of the private notes all suggest that the complete picture may have been fragmented from the beginning. It no longer feels like a simple matter of missing information. It feels like a carefully layered system where only parts of the story were ever allowed to remain visible. In the middle of this uncertainty, one of the investigators makes a discovery that changes the direction of everything. While reviewing storage records and comparing logs, they find a separate storage key that was never listed in the official documentation. This key does not match any of the known catalog entries, and there is no reference to it in the main archive system. It appears as if it was kept apart from the rest of the records on purpose, without being included in any formal listing. The final file. The last box is smaller than expected, almost plain compared to everything that came before it. There is no dramatic marking, no warning written across it, and no clear sign of what it holds. But the moment it is placed on the table, the room feels different again. It carries a quiet weight, as if everything that was uncovered so far has been leading directly to this final point. Inside this small container lies the most disturbing part of the entire investigation, not because of what it shows in a shocking way, but because of what it reveals about everything that came before. When the box is opened, the final file inside is not what the investigators expect. It does not contain complex medical language or technical reports filled with strict structure. Instead, it is written as a summarized account, almost like a narrative reconstruction of events. The tone is different from all the earlier documents. It reads more like a continuous explanation of what may have happened over time, pulling together scattered details into one flowing record. This shift in style immediately makes it clear that this file was created to understand the bigger picture, not just to list medical facts. As they read further, the file suggests a chain of events shaped by exhaustion, pressure, and growing medical complexity. It does not point to a single moment or a single cause. Instead, it describes a long buildup of difficult circumstances, where each factor added weight to the next. The picture that forms is not simple. It shows a situation where physical strain, constant attention, and increasing demands all work together in ways that became harder to manage over time. Nothing in the file is presented as isolated. Everything is connected, forming a web of overlapping challenges that grew more intense as time went on. Within this final account, the doctor's last reflection appears. It is deeply emotional in tone, written with a sense of exhaustion and uncertainty. The writing suggests someone looking back and questioning decisions made under pressure, trying to understand choices that were made in moments of urgency. There is no attempt to simplify what happened or to reduce it into a single explanation. Instead, the reflection shows hesitation, self-questioning, and the weight of responsibility carried over time. It feels like a final attempt to make sense of something that was never fully stable from the beginning. As the investigators continue reading, they realize that no single cause is ever presented as the answer. There is no moment that explains everything, no clear event that stands alone. Instead, the file shows a combination of many factors that worked together in complicated ways. Each element influenced another, creating a situation that could not be understood through one simple explanation. The truth, as it is presented here, is layered and interconnected, making it impossible to separate into one clear conclusion. This realization changes the entire feeling in the room. The shock is not based on scandal or hidden wrongdoing in a dramatic sense. Instead, it comes from understanding how fragile everything had become behind closed doors. The records show a system under pressure, where many small difficulties built up over time until the situation became too complex to describe in a simple way. It is this complexity, not a single secret, that leaves the strongest impact. In the end, there are no final answers that feel complete. The story closes with silence rather than resolution. The files are sealed again, carefully placed away, not because the truth was intentionally hidden, but because it proved too complex to reduce into one clear explanation. What remains is not certainty, but the understanding that some stories cannot be simplified without losing what they truly were.